We're going to call to order the Planning Commission work session for September 22nd, 2020. Roll call. Vice Chair Kai.
Here.
Commissioner Widola.
Present.
Commissioner Giles.
Here.
Commissioner Brown and Commissioner Harsh are not available this evening. And we also have in attendance Councilor Scott, and then I'll turn it over to staff for other introductions. So on that note, I'm turning it over to staff for any announcements and introductions.
Great. Good evening, commissioners. Before I turn this over to Lauren Schmidt from MIG, who's been helping us develop the parks plan, I just want to go over why we're talking about the parks plan and how it's going to be incorporated into the comprehensive plan that's currently being updated, and just talk about kind of the next steps and where we're going. So first, our state land use system, goal 8 is recreation. And that means that cities, we need to plan for our recreational needs for our residents and also visitors. The parks plan, what it ultimately is an addendum to the comprehensive plan document itself. So it's kind of like one of those technical documents, like the H&A and the economic opportunities analysis, and it really provides a park inventory for the city, and it also helps us guide for future investments in those parks as well. And so how this gets incorporated into the comp plan process that we're currently in is that during our parks and open space theme, which is our last block of the comprehensive planning process, this plan will help guide our policy and objectives that we create. So that's how this plan will be ultimately folded into the process. And then when we adopt the comprehensive plan, once again, it'll just be an addendum, a sub-element to the plan document itself. Are there any questions about that process? Or
so let me get my hand up.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead, Commissioner Giles.
So it's more of an informative thing for us. We're not looking like they're making the plan and we're using it to as guidelines or recommendations from them or something. What's our role in approving it or not?
So your role is ultimately Planning Commission will make a recommendation to council for adoption of this plan. Okay. How this plan will be used in the future will just be, a guiding document to how we plan parks. It'll provide, a policy framework for park planning in the future for those investments that the city does make. That helps.
So it's used and also like
add on. It's similar to but different to like a transportation system plan or a concept plan, where those things are adopted by you, but they're usually formulated by a committee. In this case, it's actually another board. And so they actually will be reviewing and approving it, but ultimately, it's sort of a two-tiered, a parallel system where they're adopting it and approving it, but then you guys are also recommending approval into the comprehensive plan.
So this document's used a couple of different ways, right? So for capital improvement projects, the city council uses this adopted budget to help figure out what projects and how to prioritize, and then it's also used to calculate SDCs. And when the fee schedule's created, they go to this document to figure out, just like we do with the parks or with the water and sewer master plans, we make sure that all the capital improvement projects are laid out so the SDCs are charged appropriately when new development comes in. So just for clarity, it looks a lot like what we've been doing in the CAC when we come to this plan has strategies and actions, where the comprehensive plan has policies and objectives. It's, I guess, just for clarity, even though this plan has those elements, we're not necessarily going to incorporate everything from the Park and Recs plan into the comprehensive plan. We may take elements of it, but not incorporate it fully. And then when we get to block 6, there's going to be additions like wetlands, greenways, stream corridors, open space. So this is a piece to the larger puzzle, and this piece happens to be used both for the comprehensive plan update, but for other tools for the city in other aspects, correct?
Correct, 100%.
Okay, and that's I just wanted clarity to make sure that even though they structured similarly, we're not going to just fold one into the other. They're being taken. Okay, that answered my 10,000-foot question. Thank you.
Great. So with that, I'm going to hand this over to Lauren.
Actually,
nope.
sorry, I have one more clarifying question. So, and let me just restate this. It sounds like the plan is getting created. We're using it as input as we're making decisions based on the bigger picture, but they're not necessarily asking for our input in their plan, correct?
Yes,
it's only kind of a one-directional thing.
Mm-mm.
I think if you guys have input this evening, this is ultimately going to go back to the Parks Board.
Okay.
So I think that you guys do have an opportunity to provide input into the process.
Okay, great. Okay. I am, as a new person, I'm also worried about stepping on toes. So I'm not trying to step on toes. I just want to know what my lane is so I can stay in it.
So in this process, if we see something and, for example, Parks is recommending something that seems to be in contradiction to what we believe the community and what we've heard, we have the ability to provide a comment this evening that says, hey, I don't know if this is really what the community wants. And then the Parks Board can take it under review, and then they may or may not make any adjustments to it. They may say, well, Crazy Jean just talking again. She doesn't know what she's talking about, so we'll just let it be. Or, hey, we didn't think about that. And then we are looking at the overall document and recommending as the advisory board to the council, we have to look at it and say, do we support the work that the Parks Board has done in coming to this conclusion? And that's our role as the advisory committee to the council on this document. So that's my perspective of a citizen involvement there. So thank you.
All right, well, I'm going to share my screen if I can go ahead and do that. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yes.
All right, and my volume's good? Okay, so I'm Lauren Schmidt, and I'm a planner and landscape architect and a principal with MIG, and have really enjoyed working with Sherwood over the last, it's about 1.5 years now, to update this plan. And it's kind of exciting to have it all coming together. And so tonight, I'm really just going to focus on a quick overview of the document, which I believe you all got. I'm going to share with you feedback, a few points from the PRAB last week. And then really, this is your time for feedback, for questions, for comments, and we'll do the same. We'll report back to the PRAB what we heard from you. So just a reminder about the process. We started out with community engagement and had touch points at various times throughout. We looked at your context and the state of your services, because you do have this wonderful park system and you provide programming and all kinds of things. So as you all noted, this serves a lot of purposes. It helps with the planning, it helps with capital improvements. It also helps with how you provide services to the community with regard to parks and recreation. All of that contributed to a needs assessment. And then from there, recommendations and looking at funding and prioritization. And then starting in about June, putting together this actual master plan document and refining it. So the touch points as we got started was your city vision, which I was very pleased to see. Included a lot about parks and recreation, including the healthy and valued ecosystems goal. So that was kind of a starting point for this. And then we delved into more detail with the community and are ready to hand it back to the community for the comp plan process. So public engagement was a key part of this. Talked about this in the session earlier this summer with some of you in the PRAB. So a lot of touch points with the general public, as well as folks who have knowledge of this system and its assets, arts and culture advocates, sports advocates, and really great turnout and wonderful, rich set of feedback from the community, which if that is of interest to you, there's lots to dive into around that. So that brings us to the PRMP document. A couple of things we heard loud and clear that was very helpful about the last plan was having a succinct kind of standalone executive summary. And so this version has that as well. And we've also tried to keep the document to being focused on what you're going to do as opposed to what you have now. So a lot of the what you have now material is in either the appendices or in the standalone documentation. So the introduction talks about the process, talks about some of the planning context, and then it goes right into needs and opportunities. And that does include information about your existing system, but it really focuses on the needs in Sherwood based on the public outreach, based on assessments that we've done, based on industry best practices and your strengths. And then chapters 3, 4, and 5 are really where the meat of the document is about what you're going to do. And we worked with Erica and with Kristen to make sure we were kind of threading the needle of all these plans that you mentioned at the beginning, because we didn't, we wanted this to be able to stand on its own as it needs to, but also feed into your comprehensive plan. So that's why we have strategies and actions here, because, we know you have goals around your vision. So those appendices, which I know Erica also sent on, that includes the inventory, it includes the assessment of the state of the system, and then 2 particular analyses, one about your existing field house and field house trends, which fed into the needs and recommendations, and the same for the senior center. And then the needs assessment itself is included as an appendix. So diving into the principles, strategies, and actions chapter, this chapter includes these guiding principles that really drew from the things that we heard from the public about what they appreciate about living in Sherwood and the recreation opportunities that are afforded there, that sense of playfulness, the fact that your park system and your trails are really friendly and support their healthiness and their ability to be both physically and mentally healthy. that artistic emphasis that you have done so well, that's a really key part of Sherwood's identity that comes out in the Parks and Recreation system. The fact that you're green and you're resilient in how you do projects and practices, and then the collaboration aspect of how you provide services. Those are some of the things that can guide decision-making in the future. There are then 8 overarching strategies. So this is more of that policy level. And these each have a set of strategies that align with it. So the first one, providing a park within a 10-minute walk of every resident. That's really about that walkable park system. And there's some specific actions around that. The integration of nature and natural systems, that was a huge piece of what people love about the park system here, and the interwoven creek corridors, and they would love to see more of that. The comprehensive network of connected trails and pathways, you'll see in the public engagement results that again and again, trails and trail-related activities came up as the top thing that people want to be doing. And this is a spot where, your transportation system plan does a great job of spelling out a comprehensive network. So we tried to support that network without replicating what's in the transportation system plan. One that is pretty important for what you all do is expanding the park system as the city grows. So really looking at some of those concept plan areas and future growth. There's a strategy around the state-of-the-art indoor and outdoor facilities, one around arts and culture, one around maintenance and stewardship, and then efficient and fiscally sustainable services. And so I'll show you another component of this chapter, which is the park development guidelines. This is something that was not part of the last plan. So the development guidelines for each classification of park that you have in Sherwood: community parks, neighborhood parks, pocket parks, special use sites, and natural areas. This provides some guidance about what the intent of that park classification is, the size and access, how it should be located, recommended resources. So that's kind of the minimum set of things that should be in a park of that type. Additional things that are appropriate for that classification. Some guidance on compatible structures and incompatible resources. So if there's elements that would detract from the intent of the particular park classification, that's spelled out too. So that will be a really good guide going forward, both for park renovations as well as for new development. So then we move into chapter 4, the recommended improvements chapter. And so this looks at all aspects of the system, the existing parks. It looks at new parks and trails, existing indoor recreation facilities, and then new recreation facilities, and then has a piece called recreation facility considerations. And that's about certain facilities, and it includes some guidance about locating and designing those particular facilities. So when we look at the existing parks, there are 3 types of treatments that are identified as kind of overarching project categories. Landscape conversion, so that includes things like turf conversion to eco-lawns. It includes the addition of understory plantings or native plantings. Enhancement is a moderate scale of capital improvement, and major enhancement are those kind of bigger ticket improvements to kind of differentiate the scale of improvements. So the map has symbols on each site, and then there's some tiering about priorities for where to work on the existing parks. And that comes from the needs assessment and from what you'll see later on, the prioritization criteria. And then we look at new parks and trails. So Brookman concept plan, which was just updated, has a great, and the previous version and the current update has a great set of parks that are planned out. And so the recommendation here is really about securing those parks and then creating a distinct identity for each as they're developed so that they work together as a whole and meet the intent of those design guidelines. The Sherwood West concept plan area, which we know is on the books to be updated. There's some guidance about revisiting the parks in the Sherwood West concept plan area to better meet the 10-minute walk guideline and some of the other policy guidance. The Tonquin employment area, because that's employment focused, the implementation of the Ice Age Tonquin Trail will serve that area in the future. If there are more concept plans, the guidance of the PRMP then can be applied to those. Trails, from the project front are addressed to add kind of a layer of priority to the off-street trails and shared youth pathways that are planned in the transportation system plan, with the additional note that if opportunities arise, adding routes and connections that the TSP did not anticipate, that this plan definitely supports that. So for existing indoor facilities, the Center for the Arts is a beautiful facility. And so it's really more about reinvesting in that asset when the time comes to keep it to the level that it's at today. The Sherwood Family YMCA, which the city owns, but which is operated by the Y, that will require asset investment. And the recommendation is to support the YMCA efforts to fundraise and expand. Marjorie Stewart Senior Community Center, since the city's taken it over, there's been some renovations and some kind of reinvigoration of the senior programming there. And long-term, renovating and expanding that facility is the recommendation, but it should be guided by a feasibility analysis and operations plan that takes into account other rentable spaces and the type of programming that's offered at the Y, because Sherwood's a relatively small market size, and so one facility could take away from another one, and we definitely don't want to do that. So the field house, which is very successful and was a great reuse of a building that the city already had, the long-term vision for that one is replacement at another site. And when that is replaced, then that site could be repurposed. So the field house replacement, that appendix that talks about the field house, has quite a bit about field house operations and trends, but the recommendation is 2 fields with storage. Right now, there's one, a meeting room and team rooms, and then it'd be designed for multiple age groups and sports. And ideally, if you could get the space, locating it next to an outdoor field complex would be really optimal, but it can function on its own as it does now. So with new recreation facilities, sports field complex is definitely a recommendation that it be focused on rectangular fields, so soccer, lacrosse. A universally accessible destination play area is something that there's a tremendous interest in the community. You have great play areas with a lot of personality. And so this would be something kind of next level. And then swimming pool came up a lot. And this plan recommends the YMCA pool expansion. It's the best option because there's such a high operating cost with swimming pools. And again, Sherwood's small market size doesn't support 2 separate pool operators. So in those recreation facility considerations, there's guidance for 5 facility types. So some of these are ones where there's, not a specific site right now. They could be a future site. Pump track bike skills course is one. Dog park, you have one. There's tremendous interest in something that can be open year-round. Splash pad, so you have one downtown. They're adding another splash pad in a community park is what's recommended, and this gives some guidance about where to and how to do that. Paved sports courts, various dimensions and types. And then finally, enhanced play experiences. So as I mentioned, people really appreciate the attention to the play areas and are looking for those to continue to be special. And this has some guidance about how to keep doing that. And those pages look like this. So there's a discussion of what it is, there's images, there's elements, and these can play into the design process. And so there's a project list that associates what all those recommendations mean with a cost. This is contained in the executive summary. And it's kind of a shorthand for the discussion in Chapter 4. So Chapter 5, implementation, has 5 components in it, discusses funding, the current status and future direction from that, capital projects, prioritization, and then it contains an action plan. So I'll focus on the action plan. There are 6 criteria: quick win, alignment with other projects, limited time, opportunity, advance major projects, take care of what we have, and provide balanced investment. And the idea with the action plan process is to develop the work plan that is looking at the 5-year chunks. And then the PRAB, through their annual work planning process, will take it down to, the next, what are we going to do in the next year? So within each 5-year chunk, the idea is to have quick win projects and be moving forward some of the major projects, and then to make sure within each 5-year chunk that there's balanced investment. So let's say it's not all on natural area trails, and it's not all focused in one neighborhood or one park, that it's spread out so that there are, as people expressed, opportunities for everybody to find a place within the park system for something that they want to do. So that's the way that's structured. And before moving on to the next steps, I'll just share a couple points of feedback from the PRAB. And the first key one is they really wanted us to elevate trails a bit more. So there is some strategy and action around trails, but one piece of feedback was, well, they wanted to see a project place and them addressed a little bit more since it was such a strong community priority. So we've made some suggestions in how some revisions to do that. Sorry, I'm just pulling up the summary memo with that. So we are looking at adding a few actions, one to strategy A that would talk about the sidewalks and pedestrian access. Another one that really talked about the transportation system plan and the asset management program very specifically. And that in the new parks and trails section, we would call out a section of new trails referencing implementation of the complete bike and pedestrian network from the TSP with a high priority for a grade separated crossing of Highway 99. There's a comment about adding the symbols used on the map in Chapter 4 to relevant pages in the chapter, just to have that visual shorthand. Making sure that trails were addressed in this action plan. And also adding an action in the action plan addressing the YMCA and the swimming pool. And there's a few editorial comments and catches, which hopefully all of you will have, because the more eyes, the better. And then the final comment from the PRAB was, because this school district agreement is currently being discussed now, they would just like to make sure that the PRMP draft reflects whatever the current status is when it moves forward to City Council. So those were the key points of feedback from the PRAB, who reviewed the same document that you have. And with that, I'll pause and turn it over. I'm going to stop screen sharing, and then I'm going to turn it over back to you all for your comments, your questions. I can figure out how to stop sharing.
It's right next to the red button that says leave. There's a little.
Oh, okay. Okay, I definitely don't want to press leave.
So for the presentation, I had communication with Erica while the meeting was going. The appendices, I don't see them in my inbox. They may have somehow gotten a quick delete, but I don't I don't remember seeing them. I just confirmed with Erica she can re-email them out if any commissioner didn't get them. Let Erica know so she can send them out. And then if you want, we can also, there'll be a complete packet with the revisions that she mentioned in her memo. We should be getting before the hearing a completely edited version with all the appendices, the official document, as part of our hearing packet. So people who haven't been through the hearings process, you will get a formal Parks Master Plan draft document before our next hearing, correct?
Yep.
All right, I see we have a question from Commissioner Giles. Oops.
Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I put my hand down but didn't unmute. So I have a number of them. I'll just do the first one for now. So when I saw this and the desire to get a sports complex or square field complex, I looked up some stats on youth participation in soccer, football, and lacrosse in Oregon over the last few years, and I'm wondering, it looks like, at least in soccer and football, there's between a 13 and a 20% decline in participation, and lacrosse was only about a 2% decline. But are those numbers taken into account for us projecting what our field needs are in the future?
Yeah, so football, we left out of, football is something we don't look at as much. But when you look at the metro area, actually, and you look at communities like Sherwood and Wilsonville, and some of your neighbors, lacrosse actually in this region is booming.
Okay.
There's a really excellent, club right up the street in Tigard. They actually sometimes play in your indoor facility, and it's a sport that's growing with your demographic. And soccer, is the same, is the same thing. I would say it surprises me that there would be a stat that there's a decline, because over time, what we've seen is soccer either holding steady or growing. What happens is you get the most play at the younger age groups, and then kids tend to, kind of more specialize. And so one of the things that's nice about, the rectangular complexes is you can design them so that you can configure them as big fields and you can configure them as small fields, and it lets you kind of meet your demand more and be more flexible than, let's say, if we're looking at the diamond sports like baseball or softball, where you've got to have a 60-foot baseline for this, and it doesn't, and the pitching mound's at a certain distance, and it's a little less flexible. But in terms of the rectangular sports, we see steady growth or increasing demand in this area. And then the other thing is, most of the fields in Sherwood are on school district property, and it's been a really good relationship up until now. But that's right now being renegotiated. So the only fields that you actually, have in control are the two fields in Snyder Park. And that's pretty unusual compared to other communities like you, that you would see more fields than that. So I think there is a need there. I think that your indoor field facility, which is something that is kind of unique in the region, the tremendous demand for that, kind of bolsters financially, it's performed really well. It's booked late into the evening because it can be, and it's adults and youth. So I think the demand is there, and it's discussed in the needs assessment.
Okay.
Yeah.
And by the way, I'm not saying that it's not there currently. The trend for, it seems like, is parents not wanting to have their kids in the contact sports as much, or, frankly, I played soccer all growing up and all through high school, and yet I can't, it's hard for me to get 22 of my closest friends together to go play a pickup game. And so I look at it as, do we have enough for our needs versus where we're going? Do we need more? Anyway, all right, I'll let somebody else ask a question, then I'll come back around.
I just wanted to chime in on that a little bit. I think keep in mind too that these type of documents are reflective of, here's a bunch of things that we may do over the next 20 years, that we plan to do over the next 20 years. There's a lot of big ticket items in this plan. Half of them will never happen in the next 20 years. So nothing in here is a commitment. This is It's an idea book of all the things that we might do over the 20-year horizon. And as those things come up, obviously funding has to be secured, the needs will be readdressed, and all of this stuff will go through, the process of actually turning it from, hey, this is in our long-term plan versus now this is going to become reality. So just because it's in here doesn't mean it's going to happen. Most of it won't, or a lot of it won't.
Thank you, Councilor Scott. Commissioner Widola, you had a question?
Yeah, my question's regarding the trail system throughout the Sherwood, city of Sherwood. We don't address maintenance. At least I didn't see maintenance of the trail system addressed in this plan, and I don't know if it needs to be, but for those of us that have been on those trails, there's a lot of roots growing up to the asphalt and all that fun stuff. So I'm just curious if that needs to be addressed in this or not.
That, I will put that in the tally of one of the things that the PRAB brought up. They brought up the asset management plan and the fact that, this should more strongly state to keep funding that, because there is actually a process. So that is one of the changes that they've recommended. So I put that down, another tick down in that list.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. You can add my vote to that because I had noted that there's only $15,000 a year for natural management, which I assume would include trails, and that seemed very light.
It would not, so that's why we would add another line item.
Okay. So can I want to ask a couple of questions, and I'd rather than, I just want to throw out a couple things just for consideration or to put in your memo. Is the 10-minute walk area, you have listed that on page 10 that there's $250,000 for 6 areas. Is that detailed in one of the appendices about what your 6 areas are and where the funds, how they would be allocated?
So the needs assessment specifically talks about the gap areas in the 10-minute walk. And then the funding allocation is really about high grading some of those areas and then doing some interventions, like it could be an added path or something like that, to be able to improve access. And so the plan does not say do X, Y, and Z, because the capital improvement process, and you've got a pretty robust capital improvement process. And so the idea is let's feed it into that.
So again, does the 6 areas, is it defined in the appendices someplace?
Yeah, in the needs assessment, you'll see the areas that lack park service.
Okay.
Within the base area of the city.
Okay. And then on page 36, I think Councilor Scott addressed this. And then when I say a page number, we always go by whatever our packet number is. So our packet is labeled as page number 36. If you don't have the same document we have, it's 22 in your master plan, chapter 2, needs and opportunities. And I just wanted to call out the other outdoor recreational facilities, that green box. Those are more aspirational, not carved in stone, correct? Those are, I guess, and I'll bring it up a second time. Page 83 has, and let me see. It keeps referencing a pump track. Mm-hmm. And I expressed concern when we were going through the public meeting. Some of the comments that were made regarding the pump track, as I remember, were how much it cost to create and the narrow focus of people that would have active use on it on a regular basis, and the varying types of them. So I don't know if this is a fad, and based on the cost, it has a lot of press in this particular document, which seems again, what we heard a lot in the public was trails and connectivity instead of pump parks and the such. So, and we had a lot of interest in parks that had multi-generational interactions.
Well,
So
for sure. And I think, this is kind of like a skate park was last time around, where, it's kind of this new thing. When you guys did your plan 20 years ago, it talked about a skate park, and 20 years ago, people weren't sure if that was going to stick around. And I would say, pump tracks, the first one locally that I saw go into place was in Portland and Ventura Park. It was a partnership with Northwest Trails Alliance, and it's still going strong. So I think this is one of these things that if you have the right land and the partnership comes together, it's a way that people can practice their trail riding without necessarily whizzing past you on the trail. But it's, I think somebody said earlier, this is a list of like a menu, and you're not necessarily going to order everything off the menu over time. You're going to, get new parks. You're going to weigh what fits in on, in those parks. That's what those guidelines are supposed to provide. So you wouldn't do something like a pump track or a lighted baseball diamond, which is also something that only appeals to, maybe 10% of your population, that you won't put that in a neighborhood park right next to somebody's house.
Right.
You'll put, yeah. So
I understand. I just wanted to put an input for prioritization. That seemed like we were this document has a lot of focus in something that seemed a little off. So, I just a comment back. Commissioner Giles, you had another question?
Yes. So when I went through, and I don't know what the dollar amount is, but when you say turf to EcoLawn conversion, does that mean taking out the artificial grass and putting in an eco grass?
No, not artificial. So this actually, there was a lovely woman at the public workshop that this was an idea we've been toying around with, and she had this wonderful letter that she brought. It was so you have a lot of grass, like lawn grass, in your parks, and that's a great thing to have in parks. But there's also places where that was kind of the default response, and so there are places where you could convert to an EcoLawn that requires mowing only once or twice a year, where you could convert to kind of a meadow grass where, aesthetically that would work and would add some more kind of bird and bug interest. So that conversion to EcoLawn is not taking out artificial turf. It's swaths of green lawn.
Okay, yeah, you said turf to EcoLawn, and I just replaced my side yard with clover. Looks great, and I like it. The one concern I would have as a citizen on that is, I love that it's eco-friendly, and I love that it brings in, birds and bees and things. It doesn't feel like I'm getting something new. So from a marketing standpoint, it feels like a dollar amount was just spent, and it doesn't feel like there's new stuff at the park. So I would just be cautious about that, about that expenditure, and maybe see if we can do, as a philosophy, just say, hey, let's look for alternative, ground coverings and things like that as we're building these, or as we have to replace things and stuff like that, versus, going out of our way to do that.
Sure.
Thank you. So I had a couple other logistics types comments on page 46, and I'll go find out what your page number is. It's page 32, chapter 3. It's your strategy D, expand the park system as the city grows. One of my comments, one of my ideas for like a D7 or something like that is one of the things that might need to happen in the parks plan is looking at our development code for design guidelines. I know that you have design guidelines in here, but when areas are added under certain circumstances, like planned unit developments or infill, or even into our expansion areas, some of the questions that come up are how does the city and the planning commission and a developer work with the parks plan to ensure that what's being developed is, and I understand the Brookman concept plan has, it's not been approved, but it's in the process of going to hearing soon, a plan for 3 parks with themes. But when an area that comes in under a planned unit development, that is, I wouldn't call it a surprise, but it's certainly not something that the Parks Board would have known about when the plan was created. So it seems like an opportunity in the guide to look at how the planning code and the development code interacts with this, to see if there's a way to tie the two together so that the guidelines that you're using are referenced in our code. And I don't know if that is a D7 item where you can say, find a link between the two, so that a question comes up oftentimes is, do we want a tot lot park over just having them pay into SDCs and go towards a bigger plan? And that's always something when we're getting these things that as a commissioner, we look at this and go, do we want, a 400 square foot park, or do we want them to do something different? So I don't know if you can add that or incorporate that into it. And in E, which is the next page, it talks about providing state-of-the-art. It looks like a lot of do something in this park or enhance this or do that. I would see one of the steps or one of the things is to encourage outreach to the neighbors in the existing parks, just to see if there's any, both to see when a plan is coming together, if someone in that area, I live near the, not, technically it says I'm within 10 minutes of walking, but I'm on a cul-de-sac. There's no way I could walk to Atlee in 10 minutes. It's, I think your 10-minute map has got some errors in it where you really can't get to a park in 10 minutes in some of the pockets. But I didn't even know, I've lived here 20 years. I didn't even know there was a park there. So it might be tiny, but reaching out to the people that are there or in the neighborhood to see if there is something that can be done, and then making sure that whatever enhancements are in agreement with the people that live there, and then form some sort of, outreach opportunities for people to provide input to it. In on your E on, community outreach, like postcards to the people next door. And then your executive summary is really nice. I appreciate having that so we can do something. I was hoping that in the executive summary, you could reference your pages. The chapter 3, you have 40 through something. I have it 54 through 58, because you have these beautiful guidelines. It would be nice that your executive summary has a paragraph that says, we've created guidelines that would allow us to provide a roadmap for someone developing in our community. That way, the executive summary points to something that I have felt we've really needed for a long time, and that would be helpful, I think, in the executive summary. So I appreciate having the guidelines and kind of a roadmap for developing it. So thank you. And I may have other comments, but those were my takeaways from that. So thank you very much. The layout and the rest of the format's really nice. Commissioner Giles, did you have another? I see. I'm trying to unraise my hand and I'm doing the wrong thing. Sorry. So, Commissioner Giles.
I do, but I don't want to dominate the discussion here. By the way, Lauren, I love the the layout for the most part, and so these are mostly nitpicky things. But the one thing that I wondered about is in the section that was just mentioned about the internal or the inside assets about the Sherwood Center for the Arts. Has there been any discussion about with the new high school opening and a performance space there, is there a thought that the mission of this Sherwood Center for the Art will be tweaked or retooled or something so that it will fill a different spot in the community than a performance center necessarily, or maybe it will be a very small performance center, but just with the with the orchestra pit and the sound system in the new school and all of these things, it feels like we're too small of a community to have two performance centers. And so I'm just wondering what the thought is on that.
Well, when it comes to kind of programming and facility operations, that is a little more nitty gritty than this plan is at, although it's trying to give parameters and direction. I would say now 2020 has been a tough year for indoor facility operators and operations and anything that does events. But the way that facility is operated, it is based on a business plan. And so, there's been a big niche in community theater and events that I may not find a home at the high school. But I think this plan definitely supports, and the way the department works, the way Kristen operates that department, it is based on a business focus with that facility. And so if the mission needs to shift to be more marketable in the future as the high school facility or other facilities come online, I think that will definitely happen, because that fiscal kind of discipline that is mentioned in the plan and is one of the goals is kind of a core guidepost of the way Sherwood does business with those facilities.
Okay, great. And by the way, I'm one of the original founders of the VPA, so I'm a big believer in the performing arts in Sherwood and everything else. I just I want to stay ahead of the curve a little bit if we're if need be. I had one other comment about, so with the field house being, an excellent investment financially, did you also run the projections for the ROI on a double field and all of the other stuff, and whether, is there some sort of a break-even timeline or anything? And I get that some of these things are not even planning to be done, but I just, again, want to just know how much of that is, hey, we would like to have this, or how much of it is we've done the analysis and yes, it would still be profitable to rebuild and.
Yeah. So the appendix that has the field house assessment looks at. So we have a partner on this who we work with. The firm is called Ballard King. They've done work in Sherwood before, and we work with them a lot. And their specialty is recreation facility operations, indoor facilities. And so they were part of our team, and partway through the project, because of what we learned about some of the community priorities, we asked them to actually look at the senior center and the field house specifically. And so what that appendix, what they found is, looking at the trends, looking at the demand in Sherwood and kind of the region, because they also work throughout the region and, kind of understand kind of who the competitors are. The projection is the two-field operation would basically, you could operate it because you generate more revenue for what you're doing today. So you would be able to break even operationally. And you know,
so you break even operationally, but that you wouldn't. I mean, the construction cost would be you'd never recoup that.
there's positive revenue flow right now and so you can design a facility to have a payback over time, but you have to go into that at the design. Like we could say, oh, you'll totally recover everything. When you have the site and you're looking at the other factors, that's when you'll size the facility. You do the same with a pool. With a pool, though, it's how much money are you going to lose because you're not going to recover your costs. So, going very spare, like you guys went very spare and you repurposed another facility. And so it was very low cost of entry. So if you were building a facility, from the ground up, they are a relatively lower cost facility because there's not that much, fit and finish. It's kind of a big enclosed space.
I guess I would argue if there was a huge upside opportunity there, then there'd be more private market players in that space than there are.
Yeah, and frankly, it's one of those things where if we took advantage of it and it's only incrementally better, then it feels like we are one of the only cities that has an indoor soccer thing. Do we need to have 2 indoor soccer fields? Or do we say, all right, well, let's design it so that it can be optimized by young families during the day? Or it's the same thing with the swimming pool where you say, hey, we're not going to recoup it on additional Y memberships, but can we sell a swimming pool only membership, or can we do another thing to optimize those resources?
Yeah, and I think that all the talk around if and when we build a new indoor sports facility is the existing facility would be probably sold and presumably redeveloped, that whole area. Right now it shares space with the Public Works Department. We have a plan, a medium-term plan, I would say, to move the Public Works Department to a less valuable real estate area than they're currently in and repurpose that whole area. So I assume that would all happen together potentially. Obviously, everything can change, but that's kind of the vision right now.
Okay.
It's a pretty attractive site. I'll just put it that way.
Okay. Well, I asked the question, but I'll just go ahead and put it out there. So is the Public Works, is that still is the tannery site on the table for that? Is that still?
Last we've talked about it, yes, but it's been a while. Erica, maybe you have more update than I do.
Actually, I don't. Julia, do you want to
Yes.
chime in on that one?
Yeah, the answer is yes. It is still on the table. We're still exploring that.
Excellent. All right. So as a commission, we're going to see this document again before us. Lauren's memo where she made some comments and potentially some of the ideas or comments that we made this evening will feed into this final document. And it said next steps that the hearing is that tentatively or permanently scheduled for October 13th?
So it has been pulled from the Planning Commission forecast for the public hearing on the 13th, just because we need to, make these edits that we've heard from the Parks Board last week, and obviously your edits here tonight. This plan is going back to council on October 6th for their review with everyone's comments included. So after October 6th, and after we get some clarity in regards to the coordination between the school district and the city in regards to scheduling for those fields, we should have a completed plan to take to hearing sometime later this fall.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for that clarification, because I did look at the future agenda, didn't see it in there, and had asked you that question earlier. And I, as a citizen who pays taxes, I don't really care if I'm paying taxes to the school or to the city. And if we have ball fields that accommodate our citizens, to me, the citizens of Sherwood own it, whether it's the school or the parks and recreation facility that is the manager of it. It would be sad to see that we had to build extra fields because we lost that collaboration within our own community. So, Commissioner Giles?
Yep. So I 100% agree with you, Gene, on that. This feels like a city and school district. You guys figure this out. There's going to be a big problem if we can't work together because, anyway. But I also wanted to kind of go on the record as saying that that I love the idea, and Gene kind of mentioned it about the Brookman project. About they're saying, hey, here are the 3 things that all the parks need to have, and then they have to have their own unique vibe to them, or unique theme or something like that. Because as a parent of young children, they're not as young anymore, but I remember going to the train park or the tower park or whatever those different things were, and so I can see that as being a draw, not only just to the immediate neighborhoods, but from other local communities. Of say, they're not all the parks are cookie cutter. You got a play set with a slide and a couple of swings. So, I don't know where you can mark that down, but put a big thumbs up next to my name.
Thank you. Commissioner Widola, did you have a question, comment?
No, that was an inadvertent push of the hand.
Okay, I'm so excited that we all have the teams working and we all have a version that works. So that's great. Commissioner Kai, you have a comment, question?
Yeah, what Commissioner Giles was saying, and it was came up in the presentation as well, talking about the providing like a next level playground experience or park experience, something that that is really nice, especially for young kids that we've seen in different areas that we've visited, are some of the themed playgrounds. In some areas, they're like they're built like a Western town. In other ones, it's like kind of like a whole castle kind of experience kind of thing. And it seems kind of obvious, but I think it would be a really great amenity, and then a good execution of something of like a medieval themed playground for Sherwood, with just being Sherwood and Robin Hood, even it being something of I can't think of what's the forest in Robin Hood.
The Sherwood Forest.
Sherwood Forest, thank you. But that's what came to my mind when when that idea of a next level playground, and I think that's something that could be done really well, that residents would really enjoy and appreciate. So.
And it might be easy to get community involvement at that point when you're getting feet in. Yeah.
With Robin Hood Festival involved and everything. They could
get buy-in from the community.
Absolutely.
So I found some perspective. So this plan, and if I'm right or wrong, maybe the consultant can bring it back to hearing, but it looked like the plan consisted of improvements in their idealistic, perfect world that everything happened because money grew on the trees that we were planting, would be $51.9 million worth of improvements. But looking at the current capital improvement budget, they're only spending $1.2 million. So we know we need to spend our dollars wisely, and not everything's going to be built. So I just wanted to, I put those two numbers side by side because I looked at the 51.9 million, and I saw the field house replacement and the sports complex was almost half, and that meant that, you know, if we did either one of those projects, so many other quick, good feel projects all around the community wouldn't be possible. So, as you know, there's a lot on the Parks Board plate to ensure that everybody gets a little piece of the pie that's out there.
So Commissioner Simpson, just as a reminder, and we talked about this at the beginning of the meeting, but sort of the next step in this process is to update our SDC methodology, and but we really needed to have an updated project list to make sure that we knew what it was that we were striving to fund through our SDCs. And so I don't know, I mean, obviously we're not gonna be able to fund every single thing in the master plan, and prioritization is important, but I don't know that I would focus so much on that at this point, because that's sort of the next step in the puzzle, is how do we implement this? And it might be through fees, prioritization, grants, all those things. So don't let that dollar figure dictate the ultimate plan.
Well, I agree with you, because I know I've seen it before, and we know not everything gets to happen because there's just not enough money to go around. But when we look at a plan that has almost $52 million worth of projects, and we are going to be incorporating SDC fees and other things, but on the housing needs analysis and the housing block that we're going through on the other side of attainable housing is less attainable if SDCs and bonds and all the other, that's where people need to weigh between housing choices, cost of housing, and the amenities that as a community we enjoy. And obviously we all really enjoy these. And so that's what our elected officials have to weigh into. So Councilor Scott, it's all on you now.
That's a really great point. And I think there's another one that kind of goes hand in hand, is if, you know, I agree, obviously these types of plans are always aspirational, and it's, you know, the likelihood is we're not going to do everything in the plan. But if you put so many things in the plan that don't end up happening, then people feel betrayed. I hear this all the time from people in the community. We were promised X, we were promised Y, because it was in one of these kinds of documents, you know, and it didn't happen. And people feel like, well, you said you were going to do that and you didn't, because they don't understand that these things aren't. Once you put out a document like this, people immediately associate it as a promise, whether it is or isn't. And we all know it isn't. People think that way because they're not, you know, they're busy and they're in their lives, and they only pay attention to the stuff at a pretty high level, you know, here and there. And they've seen it in a document somewhere put out by the city. So they think in their mind 10 years later that was something that was committed to. So there's a balancing act between that as well.
Yeah, because the skate park was a lot of angry people waiting for the skate park to be built until it happened.
Also waiting on our pedestrian bridge.
Yeah,
Yep.
but this is also a marketing problem, right? Where we just need to provide the sound bites and here is what is actually promised. Here's what we're actually going to do. The other is part of the aspirational story and things like that. And I think we can probably do better on that, or maybe even calling it out when the official executive summary is written, saying, hey, this is the only thing above the line, or these are the only things above the line.
Very nice. So, Lauren, did you any questions that you have of the commission to be answered by us before we move on to or anything that we missed in the presentation or in the?
This was great discussion, and you know, I think I have a good sense, and I bet also that Erica was also kind of keeping track where we can add to this memo, you know, to add PRAB comment to the PRAB comments and have that carry forward. So I feel pretty good about your feedback and discussion tonight, and yeah, I mean, you were pretty specific about some places where, hey, if you could do this, it would help. So I have what I need, and I would just say, Erica, help if I'm, if you're like, no, you don't.
And then one other thing is you've referenced, and I spent half the meeting trying to figure out what you were saying. And then I think I figured out that you're saying PRAB as Park and Rec Advisory Board. So that was a little bit confusing, and then trying to figure out what you were talking about. I figured it out, but it was like, what is she, I missed what you said. And then it came around a couple of more times. So the advisory board from the parks, yeah. So it was that's the abbreviations we all use in our world.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for your time tonight and for your review. I really appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to the next iteration.
All right. Looks like we'll see you later this fall then. Thank you very much. All right. So the next agenda item is our comprehensive plan, the update to the comprehensive plan update. You're muted, I believe, still.
I am muted. That's good. So I want to let everyone know that the Community Advisory Committee and the Technical Advisory Committee are both meeting tomorrow. And they're going to be reviewing our public engagement activities that have been done, that have been centered around our block theme, which is attractive and attainable housing. And they're also going to be reviewing the draft goals and policies. In addition, with the comments that Planning Commission provided us just a couple of weeks ago. So those two committees will provide additional comments, and we'll take all of the comments that we have received to date, craft the policies, reword them, rework them, and then we'll take those policies to a joint City Council and Planning Commission work session on October 6th. So those are the next steps for this block, and we hope to wrap up this block by mid-October. And then we'll be moving into our next block, which is infrastructure.
So for clarification, the joint Planning Commission City Council meeting is on October 6th.
And then I will forward you the time.
We don't know the time yet?
I don't have it off the top of my head here.
Okay. And that presentation will be the culmination of all the work, and then that will be put on the shelf, and then we'll go on to the next block. So correct. We're not technically going to hearing with this particular block. We are just listening, and if there's any red flags, council mainly, because they haven't seen it yet like we have, right?
They have not yet.
So the council will get their opportunity to provide input from what the CAC's done, and then on to the next block.
Yep.
Wow.
Don't carve this in stone, but just looking at our agenda forecast for the 6th, we have 2 work sessions. This is the second one of the 2, so they're 90 minutes total, so I'd expect this to start around 6:15.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're trying to figure out, is whether or not council is going to meet earlier. It's also a very short council meeting, and so there's a chance that they just may pick up a work session afterwards, and I think Joe's figuring that out with council members.
Very well.
All right. That's it on the update of the update.
That is.
So, quick question about that. When do we get to see the results of the survey?
Doug, I should have the results first thing in the morning.
Okay. And will you share those by email?
Yes.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And will there be a packet that's sent out or just an email with an attachment for this meeting on the 6th?
There'll be a packet.
Okay, you'll mail a packet.
There'll be a packet sent out a week prior.
Okay, so speaking of agenda items, so I show that we have the joint planning commission city council meeting on the 6th. And then on the 13th, we are just having a planning commission
work session on October 13th. And we'll be looking at and reviewing the update to the Brookman concept plan.
Okay.
So I'll be sending out, a packet of information a week prior to that work session that talks about the plan update, why we did it, the background, as well as the new plan document itself. I think Justin has a question.
Okay, sorry. I was trying to read the agenda forecast and I've lost my thing. Commissioner Kai?
Yeah, I just had a question about the recent survey, Erica. The most recent one was the one about the different policies, correct?
That is correct.
So the work that we did a few work sessions prior to that is the work that we were doing kind of for the end result of what the policies will be, and the survey on the policies was just kind of the policies put out in process to get feedback, basically, or?
Correct. So we always put the goal, we always put the policies and objectives, out in a survey form for folks to see and to provide feedback on, prior to a joint work session with Planning Commission and City Council. That's kind of been our structure along the way.
Okay, so we're still working on and refining those policies. Just because what's been done in the survey isn't what like the final policies are or will be necessarily, right?
Right.
Gotcha. Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
All right. So do we have any other announcements or things that need to be brought to our attention before we adjourn? I was just, one of the things that's at the next meeting is a quasi-judicial role-playing situation. Do we have a hearing coming up? I didn't see one on the.
We don't have a quasi-judicial hearing scheduled yet, but I expect one to be scheduled fairly soon. We might have a complete application for a planned unit development. That's the Denali Summit off of Murdoch. I expect that one to be deemed complete here in the next week, and so we'll be planning that for a public hearing probably by the end of this year.
Okay, perfect. Those are lots of paperwork to read usually, so.
Will this be the last of the Denali's, or is there more Denali's in the pipeline?
So far, that is the last one in the pipeline.
This is Denali number 3.
Denali number 3.
Yeah. All right.
Great. All right. Do we have and when are any missing commissioner slots? When does that go to plant or to city council for approval?
October 6th.
Okay, so at that hearing, vacancies can be filled at that time. Okay.
Correct.
All right. Does anybody else? Yes, Commissioner.
I do have a question. I have a citizen that reached out to me about getting involved, and I told her I would ask about the different the committees that Erica just mentioned about. Are there holes in that? Is there a set number of people? Can we send along information, or is there a web page that I could direct them to if they want to get involved with those committees?
Yeah, we do have a webpage for boards and commissions online that describes all of our boards and commissions, and if there's any vacancies, there's
Okay.
usually a form online that they can fill out, and they can submit that form to the city recorder. There's directions on the form on how to submit it, and then when vacancies do exist, we'll reach out to them.
Great, thanks.
And I think that they just, and Kristen, it looks like you're still on the line. I think that they just finished recruitment for quite a few, so I'm not sure if they have any open. But they're always accepting the applications, but I'm not sure if there's any positions currently vacant. Kristen?
Yeah, there's no position openings currently on Parks Board. There is on Cultural Arts Commission and also on the Library Advisory Board.
Excellent. Thank you very much. All right, are there any other questions or announcements before we adjourn?
I'll just follow up on that real quick.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. So just so in case those of you who aren't aware, we changed up some rules around boards and commissions last year. We did some housekeeping. So previously, the various boards and commissions had different term lengths and different times of the year that they filled vacancies, and different rules for how they filled them. So it was quite, just kind of had grown over time as the different boards and commissions had been stood up, and they all kind of had different rules. So we went through a round last year of kind of making everything the same across the board, across the various boards and commissions. I think they all expire now at the same time of year, like mid-year. So there was a huge round of new appointments and reappointments just this last couple months. So I would expect there to be a bunch of openings again around this time next year. But of course, we always have openings throughout the year as well, as people have individual circumstances come up. But yeah, just some heads up there.
And on the website, the individual commissioners, our terms of office are listed someplace too, for those of us that have forgotten when we not when we expire, but when our term expires.
Hey, for us new guys, if I'm already checking that date, that means you've pushed me too hard. So.
Okay.
And yeah, the other thing to keep in mind is oftentimes if you're appointed to a seat that someone else gave up early, you're not, even though the planning commission term is 4 years, you may not have the full 4 years when you start, because you may be finishing a term that somebody else started. So I know some people start when only have a year left, and some people have the full 4 years. So that may, just double check that if you don't know. And
for those of you that are new, you've come in at a time where we have a lot of disjointed pieces flying at us all at once. It's been quite a few different pieces trying to come together at once. So it's been a lot of different work that we wouldn't have normally been doing. A lot of times it's applications, and I think for me, who's been on for a little bit, this has been more interesting because we've had long-range planning and different opportunities to see how things are planning, not just reacting to our code, but planning for a future. So it's been a lot more interesting, and certainly a bit more work than what we had done previously. So appreciate all the extra hard work for everybody having to read way more packets. So, all right. Do we have any other comments or questions before we adjourn? Erica, do you have anything else before we depart?
I do not.
All right, then I will call this Planning Commission work session adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.